Today's guest started his business 12 years ago in environmental consulting. It's been a fun ride over the last 12 years with a lot of different things that have come up. A few different technology companies were in the making, were shut down, some still existing. It's an interesting space with a lot more view and focus on environmental impact within the oil and gas industry. He is recently a Alberta Chamber Resources Leader Award recipient, which just happened a few months ago or a month ago, and also a 40 under 40 for Avenue Magazine. And he's also, from back in his college or uni days, a competitive swimmer, which we might get into as well, with a pretty interesting track record. So without further ado, Adam Martinson, welcome to the show.
Cool. Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And thanks for making the time. Looking forward to the chat. So maybe to start things off, do you mind giving just a quick overview, but a bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, totally. So president and founder of AJM, born Calgarian, I'd say. I did kind of grow up overseas, and Calgary's always been home.
We're overseas. I didn't know this.
Yeah, my family moved to Saudi Arabia when I was 4. So I was there for actually most of my childhood, which was quite an experience. It was, going from Calgary to we lived in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. My dad actually wasn't in oil and gas or in energy, which a lot of people.
I would have thought. Yeah,
that's the assumption going from Calgary to Saudi. No, my dad's a surveyor and then got into cartography, map making.
Okay.
So his work brought us over there in the late 80s. I think, it was kind of a rough patch in Calgary, as some folks remember.
Yeah.
Spent most of my childhood there. It was awesome. Got to travel around a ton as a kid.
Brilliant.
Like, the Middle East is so close to everything. So put a lot of things in perspective. But then, back to Calgary after that for junior high school. And Calgary's always been home. So.
Right on. I've been in Alberta for, I think, 18 years now. And I still, every time I meet a, true Calgarian, you're close to it. It's like, an odd breed. You don't always come across that, but maybe it's just people hanging out with, but awesome. So, and then you did some schooling down in the US as well, I believe.
Yeah. So I was, as you mentioned, sports have been a big part of my life. Started swimming when we lived overseas. Well, played every sport as a kid. But, swim club was definitely one of the things to do in the desert.
We've got a Speedo picture later that we'll pull up.
There's probably a few Speedo pictures out there.
Yeah, all over sure.
But it was, the one sport that I kind of just, I guess, fell in love with and did more and more of. And kind of when I got to the age of having to choose one thing to, specialize a bit more, it was swimming. And so through high school and everything, started to get pretty competitive and was offered a scholarship down to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV. So went down there on a full ride swimming scholarship. Figured give it a shot, and shout out to my parents for letting an 18-year-old kid leave home and live in Vegas. But it was awesome.
That could have gone sideways. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. People are like, "Oh my God, Vegas must have been so crazy and so cool." I was like, you know what? I was underage. I was broke. And we were swimming all the time. So it was like we had like 5:30 in the morning practices 4 days a week at least. And after. Anyway.
Yeah, real competitive. Yeah. Keep you busy.
It was not the party Vegas scenario, but I know I still love Vegas, and it was a great experience, great coaches, great teammates, and we were able to do some pretty cool things. So
nice. Yeah. Before we move on, and just reading through a bit of a download on you from one of your submissions into, I think it was 40 under 40. I learned here just a couple of days ago that I think you placed number or 5th in rankings to go to the Olympics, and the first 3 go to the Olympics, which is pretty interesting. That's neat. Like you're in the top echelon there.
Yeah. So at Olympic trials in, what year was that? 2004, I guess. Yeah, I was 5th in the 200 back in Canada. So the top 2 go to the Olympics. Yeah, there's also a time standard. Yeah, the year before I was 3rd at nationals. That was my best placing. So like bubble-ish. I'm 5'10", so pretty tough to be like
a little bit short on the reach. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm racing guys that are like 6'8". There was a guy down at UNLV who was 6'10", who was a backstroker. And it's just like, you know what? Like, I just got to work harder than you. Like, there's no other way. Like, so anyway, genetics is a thing, but
totally.
Love swimming, love the athletic side of it. And had some pretty good success and a lot of good experience.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Cool. So environmental background. I know you've written a bunch of papers throughout the years, I guess early years. There's a lot of writings about your ongoing with rattlesnakes, and maybe if you can, like, take a sip of your coffee quick for people. I love this morning.
Hold it this way.
Oh yeah, look at that. So rattlesnake coffee cup. So the real deal here.
Yeah, this is the one I pulled this one out for interviews just to make sure, to intimidate
memorable
people.
too. Yeah, totally.
That's right. Yeah. Like, who is this weirdo?
Yeah, I might have a picture of early days with you with way more hair, younger, on a highway with a snake we might pull up. But anywho, so to keep going, maybe let's go back to your decision to start your consulting business. So about 12 years ago, maybe just over. So I believe you were working in the oil and gas industry. You were doing environmental type work, consulting with a different firm, and then take us back to that. Like, what made you identify the opportunity, or what pain were you seeing that you said, okay, it's time to jump? And what did that look like? Yeah,
totally. I think provide a bit more context and take it a bit further back. So,
sure.
In high school, again, shout out to my parents for having the foresight to put me in front of a career counselor, not like just the ones at school, but they actually hired a guy that he was like a PhD level psychologist. Anyway, spent a whole day with him doing kind of assessments, and he learned about me and kind of what drove me. And I think I was like grade 11, or like I was pretty young. And
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it was quite weird looking back on it. But
because usually it's like, okay, you're going to go into get a business degree, you're going to do an arts degree, and who knows where you go? Maybe lawyer, you're going to be an engineer or a doctor, and it's like, okay, pick these 5 things, or get into the trades, right?
Totally, yeah, no, and I distinctly remember this conversation with this guy. So this is like late 90s or so, or somewhere around there, and he's like, "So what do you want to be? We're like, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know, doctor, lawyer, accountant. Like, I don't know, they all sound like they good jobs and they make money." It's like, you shouldn't do any of those things. You should be an entrepreneur. You should own your own business, and you can hire those people. You can hire the lawyers and the accountants. I was like, oh, like, yes, thank you. Like, that sounds way better. Because I was just saying those other jobs because they sounded, I don't know, respectable and stable, and
right. Everyone else talk about them. Right.
And you make a good living and good quality of life and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so he was one that kind of first put that entrepreneurship bug in my ear, I guess, and planted that seed. And I don't know what it was about these personality assessments or what he learned about me during that day, but he was pretty adamant that it's like, no, this is what you should do. I was like, oh, sweet. And I was like all for it.
The gift. Yeah.
Yeah. It was looking back on it quite helpful. And so I was like, okay, well, what do I do in school? Like, I'm still going to go to school. He's like, you just do whatever you're interested in. It doesn't matter. You'll find a business that you could start, or, being an entrepreneur, you'll just, as long as you're doing something you enjoy, it doesn't really matter. So I was like, oh, perfect. Well, I like wildlife and biology, and like environmental type stuff is interesting. And so I started and did an environmental science and a biology minor for my undergrad, and really enjoyed it. And it was super interesting, and ended up doing a master's in environmental science as well. And that's how I kind of got that technical foundation at a school, and working with a company that no longer exists, or has been bought out a few different times, but is Terra Environmental at the time. And yeah, just kind of got into it, understood how, or started to understand how kind of the business side of things worked on the environment and regulatory industry, how we're helping clients get projects approved and doing assessments, and the whole consulting model and everything else. But kind of always in the back of my mind, knowing it's like, I kind of want to do my own thing. And the other piece of advice that I still remember, and I find myself thinking about quite a bit from that career counselor guy, he's like, always look at something and think about how you could do it better. Just like, walk into a grocery store. How would you do that better? Walk to the post office. How would you do that better? And so I'm working at these consulting companies, and it's like, well, how would I do this better? It's like, well, I've got some ideas. So
it's funny how that works. Once you start looking for, it's like I don't know what the synonyms called, but it's when you're looking for the like Volkswagen bugs when you're driving down the road with the family, and then you're like, I never see those, and all of a sudden that's all you see. It's like when you're looking for it, you see it, right?
Yeah. Confirmation bias, maybe, or anyway. So doing work there, and really enjoying it, like enjoying the field work and just getting out a bit. Like it was a ton of fun.
So you did that for about 6 years or so.
I did a bit of consulting work for about a year and a half, did my master's, and then did another about 2.5 years at the other company. So I guess all told after my undergrad, ish.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, enough of a foundation to be dangerous, but by no means like an expert, I'd say. Yeah. But one of my clients was in Canada at the time, so became Cenovus, and I was handling all their kind of Southern Alberta drilling programs. So all the wetland and wildlife assessments needed for, I think it was mostly coal bed methane, if I remember correctly at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, doing these assessments, regulatory applications, and all these kinds of things, and building a good relationship with the client and doing good work and all that kind of stuff. And they approached me and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come and work directly for us? Like basically contract to us and be the one to manage the consultants." Like my clients were overloaded and they needed more support. And I was like, perfect. This is my opportunity to kind of jump out. And, the whole contract thing was actually ideal because then that's when I incorporated AJM Environmental just to be able to do that contract work directly for Cenovus. And that was 2012. So,
So you saw the opportunity. You're working in-house at an environmental consulting firm. You're looking at, from your mentor there or advisor, early career in high school, I guess. And you go, I think I can do this better. And so you're on the lookout. And then every career and entrepreneur journey has a little bit of luck somewhere. Usually you have to create it by just hustling all the time. But you get a bit of luck. You're a great customer, right? In Canada, Cenovus now. Has this need. So this need, and that's your jumping point, which was fantastic. This need from, we'll call it Cenovus, just dive in that more. Like you were working at the consulting company as an employee, getting contracted out to Cenovus, and now they wanted you to come full-time for just them, or at least have a lot of your time, and then manage people from the company you would be coming from as well as others?
Totally. Exactly. So basically just oversee all of the environmental work that was being done and all the regulatory applications from a variety of different consultants to make sure it was all getting done and all these drilling programs could move forward and everything else, but be the person on the Cenovus side keeping an eye on all of it rather than the one in the field or the consultant actually doing the work.
Right. And then did they have a team, like an environmental team, land team as well? Okay. So then you'll be working for that team. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And the way it works in the energy industry is typically, I started contracting with Cenovus, but I had an office there. I had a Cenovus email address. Like you couldn't tell the difference between me and an employee. So it was like,
is the CRA going to come get me? Yeah, we've had this conversation before with lots of people, but
I made sure I had like another
few. Yeah, totally.
So it wasn't as big of a leap as it was a pretty easy jump to make because guaranteed client, guaranteed hours.
Yeah.
Really it was just the structure. Sure, I was incorporated and a small business, but for all intents, I was being treated very, very well and almost identically to a
and the risk was limited. Like you said, maybe it's $2,000 to get all your, banking and incorporation set up. And then worst case scenario is like, if they don't like you or it doesn't work out, you don't like them and it dies, you go back to another consulting agency, you go find another customer. Like it's limited risk.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. The startup costs on a consulting business are very low typically. It was not super capital intensive. So from a risk basis and in a lot of ways kind of cutting out the middleman of the environmental consulting company I was working for and working directly for a client. So actually making, way more money, which was compensating for that risk as well. So I guess the bigger risk, well, as I was at Cenovus, 6 months in or however long it was, the conversation started coming up about, well, hey, how would you like to become an employee here? Sure. And it's like, and just knowing kind of my entrepreneurial leanings and then seeing how a giant company runs and the bureaucracy and everything, I was just like,
that sounds horrible.
Yeah. But saying it as nicely as possible, be like, oh, thank you so much. I'm flattered. But I'm good. But also knowing that the risk being, if things go sideways, and they typically do in the oil and gas industry every 7 years or so, the contractors are going to be the first ones out the door, right? So that's the risk I knew I was taking, but I was okay with it because I kind of felt that once a big company like that kind of gets their meat hooks into you, kind of hard to break out. And
yeah, doing stuff well.
It'd be that much harder to go and start a company from scratch after that, or really follow that entrepreneurial path. So, or at least that was my, maybe that's true. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that was kind of my thought process at the time.
But even on that, so the type of work that you were doing, was it only, we'll call it new projects greenfield, or was there also like brownfield, so existing facilities that you're doing work on as well?
That particular role was actually just greenfield new stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the economy changes, and then less resources, dollars are being applied to new builds, and so potentially, yeah, you'd be part of a cut, maybe. Yeah.
Totally. Okay. And lo and behold, 2014 oil prices tank. And, all the work I was doing was directly tied to these CapEx drilling programs. And literally overnight, those went to zero.
Right.
And, Cenovus and every other major energy company probably in the world, but, in Calgary for sure, was looking for ways to save money. And they're like, well, who's this contractor doing our kind of CapEx drilling programs? Like, there is no drilling program. Like, this guy's got to go. Yeah. Early 2015 was basically like, look, bad news, Adam. Like, the time, like, we can't justify keeping you around. And
at that point, it was just you? You were the company? Okay.
Yeah, it was just me.
So what happened? You were out?
Yeah. So that contract came to an end.
Okay.
And it was pretty crazy. So my wife, Emily, and I had bought a house in Calgary and just took possession in the fall of 2014, and literally nailed the peak of the oil prices and like peak Calgary real estate market. Yeah. And then like the week after we took possession, or it was like comically close, that like things started to go on the downturn. So we just bought this new house, and my wife was pregnant with our first child, due in May 2015. And it was literally April 2015 that Sonovus was like, okay, well, this work is, we're not renewing your contract. It's done. Like, we can't justify keeping it. So yeah, that was a pretty crazy time.
It's like the triple whammy again, right? So you have exciting baby on the way.
Oh yeah.
But then it's couple that with, I think Emily was working at the time. She's going to be going on mat leave.
Yeah.
So get a few dollars, but I've also need to go find another customer or client.
Yeah.
Three whammies. Great.
Totally. And it's like, and not that EI is even much at all or hard, but like as a business owner, you can't even get that. So like,
sure. Exactly.
Literally like out on my ass. So
yeah,
again, perhaps it's luck, perhaps it's just from doing good work and being a good person. But my kind of main supervisor or kind of main guy at Cenovus was chatting with me at the time and approached me. He's like, look, we've got these programs, these environmental monitoring programs in the oil sands. And there was this, so Cenovus has 3 different oil sands facilities, and each monitoring program was being done by a different major consulting company. And he's like, we think we can streamline these, kind of save some money. And we also know that your technical background is right along. This is the wetland stuff, which I've been kind of doing. He's like, would you be interested in taking these on? And it's like, oh my gosh, yes. I was like, of course. Like,
let me think about it.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, I guess right place at the right time, or luck, or just having been doing really good work. And they obviously, they like me. I
think it's the latter. Yeah. Knowing you for a couple of years here, you were grinding, doing good stuff. You created your luck, and opportunity comes.
Right. And so when that opportunity came up, that's really when I shifted to operating as a pure external company. So yeah, took on these regulatory required monitoring programs, literally reduced the cost by 2/3 across the board for Cenovus. So it was a win for Cenovus. They were big projects for me. I had to bring on some subcontractors, and then 2016 ended up hiring my first employee.
Lindsay.
To be able to handle
awesome.
stuff. Yeah. So Lindsay Tennock, she was just unreal.
And is she still with you?
No, she moved out to Kelowna and now has had a baby, and
okay.
so she's not. But
gotcha.
Yeah, no, she.
Always want to ask the
But it's,
early day teams. Cool.
yeah, yeah. Couldn't have asked for a better person. Yeah, and that's kind of when things started actually. That's the more of the true jumping off point from my perspective, when it's like, okay, now we're looking at payroll, and now we're looking at expenses, and now we're okay. Let's make sure we're. Whereas before it was kind of pretty predictable, monthly invoices being sent to Cenovus and they're paying them. Whereas now it's like, okay, well, workflows start fluctuating and expenses and subcontract.
Whole other ball game, totally.
And all that, totally different than how we were operating before. So I kind of, although when AJM was incorporated in 2012, I kind of think of like 2015 as more of like when we actually really got started. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it was that opportunity, because in the first gig you had, which was, we'll call that like the greenfield new projects.
Yeah.
That was aligned where you're kind of the middle person managing external resources. And that's what it was like. What's really the expansion, right? You go maybe get some more clients, but maybe like there's only so much one person can do, right? So maybe you're maxed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now the new opportunity is, here's 3 programs already running. And what I kind of heard was there's more work than just Adam can do. So if you take this on, you got to go get people. So the opportunity kind of forced you to go do it, which that's good to have once in a while, right? It's like, okay, great. Is this what I want to do? Yes. Okay, let's go. I guess we're growing and I'm getting people. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It was kind of, by necessity and making sure we could pay our bills and, feed this new baby and everything else. So that first summer, when it was just me and then I had a few subcontractors just figuring it all out. I was back to being in the field a ton. So having not been in the field for a number of years, I think
you realize that you grew a little soft.
Yeah, these office hands were pretty delicate, but it was I know it was quite tough on Emily, just with a new baby and everything that goes around. And then it's like, well, like I gotta go. Like this needs to happen now, otherwise we're in pretty rough spot.
Do you like the host? Yeah. And if so, I got to go for 2 weeks or exactly. And at that time, were you doing like in the field? Were you just out there all the time, like 30 days straight, or were you doing like 2 and 2s or?
No, it was probably worked out to being, I'd have to look back. Like, I think the longest trip was like 2 weeks.
Okay.
Maybe not even, but sure. I had a few that were like 5-7 days, something like that.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Pretty.
Yeah. Enough to be strenuous on the new young family. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. When, yeah.
Everything's going sideways at home, but yeah. So obviously, Emily's name will come up several times here, like partners always do. And usually they're doing a lot of work as well.
Totally.
So 2016, you kick things off. You've got subcontractors going, I guess, 2015, 16. And you're starting to grow the business more. So I guess maybe before we go on, there is a lesson here that keeps coming up when I chat with owners, and that it comes back to like you have to be in the game to find opportunity. If you're always just looking at where's the best place to go start a business or take on another product line, etc., like in a totally different industry or segment, that can be super challenging. But if you're in the game, whatever that may be, within an industry and segment, that's where the opportunities come. And there's so many stories that it's like, how did you identify that opportunity? Well, I kind of had this idea, but a customer came to me and said, hey, I need this. Or like it was just there. So exactly. So still working with Cenovus, you are working on existing assets, doing required regulatory work. So one customer, and that's always something that comes up with businesses is having one customer. That's great. There's lots of businesses out there that have one customer that is a large portion of the revenue, but it's also a risk too, right? Totally. They leave, all of a sudden you go from 100% revenue to 0. So what did that look like? Did you start adding new customers right away, or was that like just in the last 6 months, or what did that look like?
No, it's actually kind of a funny story and maybe a bit of a silver lining of what then happened in the industry from 2015 to 2018. Like anyway, for a number of years, companies like Cenovus were in pretty rough shape. So they were selling assets. And what ended up happening was some of the assets that I was working before on for those capital development programs, those assets ended up getting sold. but the teams ended up going with them.
Okay. Yeah.
So all of a sudden, so I'll give you one example. So Cenovus sold most of their southern Alberta stuff to a company called Torxon. All the Cenovus, that almost entire team from Cenovus went over to Torxon.
Right.
And then Torxon's like, okay, well, we need someone to manage the environment and regulatory stuff for these new builds. And they're like, well, let's call Adam. So
we know this guy.
Yeah. We know this guy, and he does good work, and he knows the deal. And it was kind of like diversification from Cenovus imploding to a certain extent, right? Like, so sure. As they were spitting off assets, my network just naturally expanded. New people that were moving, kind of in various different places, and
so how many of those happened? Like there was Torxon. Were there like another 5 of them?
I'm trying to think. There's Torxon. There was IPC, International Petroleum Corp, bought some of the other assets. Whitecap bought some of Cenovus's Saskatchewan assets, although I didn't end up doing any work with Whitecap, but it was one of the examples.
Several.
Did Cardinal come? Yeah, like a few.
Cardinal, yeah.
And especially when it was like me and one other person, it was like more than enough to, I probably couldn't have taken on more at the time. But it was diversification kind of just came from
opportunities that come up.
The relationship that I built with these people and the fact that these assets were kind of moving to different companies and having done good work in the past. So, yeah. Yeah,
and this is another common theme. Chatting with businesses, I've come across businesses without sales teams. I look at, wow, that's awesome. You've been around for 20, 30, 35 years, and you don't have like a dedicated sales team. It's like, how you run this business, and it's growing over there. Some dips, especially if it's oil and gas, but it comes down to this. It's you have a niche that you're working in, and then really good service and focus on value to your customer. And all of a sudden, in the longer midterm over the years, these things come back, and all of a sudden you have these, and especially in oil and gas, there's so much change, right? What you just talked about, right? Assets change hands over probably every 7 years or so, right? Every up and down. So yeah, interesting. Great. Yeah. So I know you had we talked about this in a pre-call. Dates my sales history, pre-gaming sales calls. So 2020, I believe, was a phenomenal year. Gangbusters, you're going I think doubling revenue. So prior to that, I guess just entering the year that you essentially doubled, what did the company look like? How many people and what types of services and kind of ballpark of number of customers?
Yeah, it's all a bit of a blur, to be perfectly honest. I think we were, 2018, 19, I think we were maybe 4 people.
Yeah.
Part of the reason it's a bit of a blur was also starting some other companies at the same time.
Yeah, we're getting into that. Yeah.
So I kind of
where were those people? Were they in the?
10 people in the office, but who was working on what? Yeah. So on the consulting with AJM, I think we were,
3-4 solid,
maybe a half a dozen. Leading up to 2020, maybe not even. And our customer base was slowly growing, but we were still definitely, I felt, too dependent on one customer, still being Cenovus,
right,
and too dependent on one industry, being upstream oil and gas. So, that was a major risk that I knew we needed to deal with sooner than later. And thankfully we did. So we started making inroads into the midstream industry, so pipelines and those kinds of things. Then, obviously there's still some fluctuations and trends, but they tend to be not as big ups and downs. They're it's a bit more, they're utility businesses. They're a bit more predictable, or these plants don't change on with the daily price of oil. So we started making inroads into the midstream world, doing some work there. Yeah, and then brought on a few key people that were able to diversify our service offering. So brought on a senior aquatic biologist who's 20-year experienced guy who's great connections and knows everything about the fish world, which I like. That's not the area I play in, but with that expertise and his network, we're then able to start supporting companies like Tech down in the down near Sparwood. There's lots of challenges with mining and
so you're oil and gas. Now you diversified over to some mining.
Mining, and then we're picking up the little projects, little jobs here and there. Really not enough to really move the needle, but laying the groundwork for getting into other areas and
Sure. Okay. And as of today, I know we'll get there later, but just curious right now, as of today, are you predominantly oil and gas and mining, or are there other segments or industries that you've expanded to?
Yeah, definitely. So upstream oil and gas, midstream. Midstream's actually probably our biggest now. Mining. We've been doing work in the forestry sector. We've done some renewables work.
Okay.
We've pumped hydro projects and etc. We've done some work for provincial government. We've done some work for the federal government even. What else? We're a nice small size. We're able to kind of get involved in neat projects for like even NGOs. So Trout Unlimited is actually a client of ours, and they need some habitat assessment and restoration work done or something like that, and we do it for basically no profit, but just to support a really cool organization that's doing great work. And those are the projects that frankly just make you feel good too, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's like the give back piece. Yeah.
And
sorry, was that Trout Canada? I didn't even know that was like, I knew Ducks Unlimited from my days down in Texas and even here in Alberta, but okay.
Yeah.
Assuming that they're somewhat, obviously different animal species, but like similar kind of mandates. Yeah. And probably organizations, how they're run, but man, Ducks Unlimited, great stuff. I haven't been involved with them for a long time, but not only the great things that you do, but the people that are involved, like the people are probably even the better part of it. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So coming back, you have somewhere around a half dozen, maybe a little bit less, working on the environmental consulting. And I opened the chat here today talking about a few other businesses that you've started. So you have a real estate business kind of connected to, I think, where you're residing right now. Not only there's much to that, but always great to diversify. And then you also had, I think, or have and had 3 technology businesses, experiments, right? And I think every great entrepreneur should have a bunch of these fun lessons that you've paid for. Hopefully they're somewhat fun, right? Net. And so tell us a little bit about that. We've got Hub H2O. We have, I'm going to forget the other one. It's not right in front of me, but I think Hub was the first one, was it?
No, Hub was the second one. And Terra Technologies was actually the first. Yeah.
And what year was that?
So that was 20.
Okay. So in Terra, what was it and what led you to identify the opportunity?
Yeah, it came about, what was the origin story there?
Sometimes you want to forget these things. I apologize.
Yeah. I don't know how I came across it, but there used to be these things, and maybe they still have them, but it was a startup weekend competition in Calgary. Yeah. It's basically, you show up for the weekend, you pitch some ideas, and then a loose group of software developers and marketers and all this, like, get behind your idea, and you go hard on it for the weekend, and then you pitch it to the judges at the end of Sunday afternoon or Sunday night, and you can kind of win a bit of money or something, and you can carry on with it, or you can just like, hey, that was a fun weekend, like, peace.
Back to the day job Monday. And sorry, and you did that. I did one of these startup weekends back in, it must have been late 2013, early 2014, which is my first tech startup. But so you did that in 13?
13. Okay. Yeah. I think it was spring of 13. I'd done one before, just like showed up just to get a sense of it. About. Joined the team and had some fun, and like the business didn't go anywhere.
Just a quick one. Like I don't even know if they do those anymore, but for a weekend and someone that's interested in meeting people that are thinking about new ideas and just going through, essentially they're 2 all-nighters. You're just grinding, eating crappy pizza. You were sleeping there, and then I'd say probably like 2 to 5% of the ideas that are started keep going on, and probably 80% of those should have died anyways. But like extremely fun weekend.
Totally, yeah, and really eye-opening. So yeah, the first one I just kind of showed up on my own, just put myself out there, was vulnerable, but had a great time. I was like, okay. There was another one coming up a few months later. I was like, I think I'm going to pitch an idea here. Oh, cool. And I had a close buddy, and we've always toyed around with business ideas and those kinds of things. I remember like the weekend before, we were sitting down and had a list of ideas. Like, what could we pitch? There were some horrible ideas on there, but like really funny ones. But what we landed on, and what we ended up pitching was like a data aggregation tool for environmental assessments. So right now, still, it's gotten a bit better, but at the time, if someone who wanted to, let's say, drill a well in some location out in the middle of nowhere, it was a manual process to go grab all the information from, okay, there's a wildlife database over here, there's a plant database over here, there's an archaeology database over here, there's a landowner database somewhere else, there's a soil database, and it's manually pulling all this information. It's like, okay, well, why can't we just automate that? Yeah, and pull all that information into one spot. So that was the idea. It was kind of a big data type play, and that was pretty hot in 2013.
Totally.
Pitched it, obviously having the industry kind of insight and knowledge of it from the work that I've been doing, that pulled a lot of weight, and it ended up winning the competition, or coming second. I can't remember. I think we might have won. I think we won for the energy related startup.
Oh, awesome.
So it was like 10 grand or something, enough to be like, oh, sweet, okay, cool.
Cool.
A bit of validation, but probably the biggest thing that came out of that was meeting a few key software developers that ended up working with over a number of years and building that network, because I'm not a software developer by any means, and being able to then kind of get exposure to that and learn how that works. And,
product development, how like the cycles work.
For sure.
So startup weekend, you get this idea, you pitch this idea, you win it. This seems to be a theme. You're always hitting the podium or close to the podium. I love it. So you get a few dollars, which, whether or not it's a great idea to continue through with or not, kind of pushes you to say, okay, well, I get $10,000. I'm going to go spend this and see where it goes. So I know it ended up folding in 2016. So it went on for 2.5, 3 years. Like, what was the apex? Did you get traction, commercial traction? What did that look like?
No commercial traction from what I remember. I think we built a pretty cool product, but it was kind of one of those classic, like, product before the problem type thing. So the problem makes sense in theory, but then when you get into it, long story short, without going with the details, those assessments, still, and especially at the time, were being done by external consultants.
Right.
And those external consultants make money by billing for the hour.
Right.
So if you provide a tool that in one click eliminates 2 hours or 3 hours of billable work for them,
what's your deal flow going to look like? How are they going to? They don't want to adapt.
Vaporize on that, and you're not going to sell it to that person who does that work, because they're like, oh, this is my job. So consulting companies kind of saw that as a threat, and were like, oh, well, you can just charge a flat fee for these types of projects, and kind of like they're not going to change their model for
It's tough.
That's not.
And then on the other side, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but on the other side, you would have the customer. Yeah. And in order for this to work, you would need the customer to push it on those other service providers. But like, was it a large enough needle, like large enough to move the needle for them? Or they're just like, no, take it or leave it. Yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we thought like, oh, well, maybe the Sonovuses of the world could do this type of work in-house then, and rather than shipping out. But like, really, the people in-house at large energy companies most of the time are more project managers than doers of the work. That's the nature of that industry, is a lot of the actual work is put out to engineering firms or environmental service firms or whoever. They're not the ones doing the work, so it's not really a pain point for them. It's like, sure, they'd like to save a few bucks, but really, we weren't solving a big enough problem. We're saving. It's like, okay, well, something that usually costs you $300-400, we'll do it for you for $100. You're like, $200. Like, you're not. Like, cool, but no thanks.
But that's part of the lesson, right? And those are the things that you learn through your entrepreneurial journey. Is you look back and go, wow, I spent 2 years, and I could have spent like 2 months chatting with customers and kind of doing back of napkin transactions to see if it would work. And then also asking the question of, we kind of know this now. Generally, I think the rule of thumb is, are you going to make their world 10 times better than it is today? Whether that's like cost basis or like their workload or their friction, how's that 10 times better? And if you're less than that, it's like, it just doesn't matter, right? It's not sticky enough. But
yeah, for sure. And that was definitely one of my takeaways, is like, if you're going to try and solve a problem, like starting a business, like especially a tech startup, you might as well pick a hard problem, because it's going to be the same amount of work.
Yes. Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
The problem you're solving and everything else ahead of time. So that was probably the biggest takeaway there. But it was a phenomenal experience. Learned a lot. We raised a little bit of money from some Alberta Innovates grants and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So running the cycle on that process too. So those are
totally like learning the ropes and building the network there, and so things that would all be very helpful later on when we started Hub H2O. So
right. Okay. Let's go. Now we're on to you shut and Terra Technologies down in 2016. Yeah. And then Hub H2O started up in 2016. So you're like, okay, done with that one. I've got some more rooms, but I got another one. Let's go. So what was the opportunity value proposition for Hub H2O?
Yeah. So at the time, it was relatively unknown or not really well discussed how much water the energy industry was using, or how big of an issue water was, especially, hydraulic fracturing was, has been around for a long time, but was just really starting to ramp up as far as the size of the fracs and the amount of water that was being needed. And with all the development in Northeast BC and Northwestern Alberta, it's quite jaw-dropping the amount of water that does get used. So
yes. And I think the US was ahead of us, right? They were like a decade ahead. And then we were doing some of it within Canada, fracking, but it was, I guess, back in late 15 or somewhere around 15, 16, it really started to ramp up.
Yeah. So kind of saw this opportunity, and it was with someone I'd worked with at Cenovus, Jill. She was no longer with Cenovus, but she had worked on a water tracking reporting tool for their oil sands assets, because there was, I guess a year or two before, there was some boo-boos, shall we say, with reporting to the regulator, and there was a big fine it levied and all this kind of stuff. And one of them was kind of creative sentencing. It's like, well, develop a system to make sure this never happens again. She had basically led that and hired a external software development company to build an app that the water truck drivers would use to record all the volumes, and it would all get automated, rather, because before it was all paper sheets, and that's kind of was the root of the issue on the regulatory front. So we saw her and I were chatting, and that was being done and existed at the oil sands facilities, and we're like, well, where the bigger problem is with water? It's the unconventional resource. It's the hydraulic fracturing. It's like, it's not in the oil sands region of Alberta. Like, the amount, an 80,000 cubic meter frac, like, where's all that water coming from, and how you track it? Like, it still needs to be tracked and reported. And it's, a huge cost driver too. Major, massive or big percentage of a hydraulic fracturing job is, moving the water and
permitting where you get it. Location, tracking, and then disposal afterwards. Is it disposal, treatment, whatever it may be? Yeah, exactly.
Do you have to truck it? Are you able to use lay flat pipe? Can you tie into a facility? Like, all these questions around water, which were really just starting to come to the surface. So we took a few different tacks with that. So we first started by talking to Sonovus and be like, look, you've got this tool in the oil sands. Could we license it from you or take it and just do it somewhere else? And so we approached that, or we broached that and tried to kind of delicately see if we could work that out.
License for a different application, wasn't a good.
Long story short, Cenovus is not a software company. They were like, this is
never done it. So give us 10 years and we'll make it.
So okay, well, let's just build our own. So this is where I had the network of a few software developers from the Terra days, and kind of chatting with them, be like, hey, look, guys, there's this thing, it sounds pretty cool. There's an opportunity, we think, for putting this together, and built the team from there. So,
right. And you've done this differently. So this is I'll call it typical. The typical software startup is you bootstrap it a little bit, where you get a bunch of free labor. That's essentially what I did. But a lot of companies is okay, 5 people come together, you have different skill sets, you do free labor to kind of build out your first beta or MVP, whatever. And then after that, you're looking at friends and family to throw some dollars in, because you can't go not making money forever and people need to get paid. And then you get into your angel investing, and then your series ABC, whatever. But you've done it a little bit differently. And I don't think this gets talked a lot about, but there are great companies that do this, which is, maybe we'll just call it the bootstrap from existing business. So you have AJM running, and some of the earnings from that are going over to run this experiment. So you're not diluting your business. You're not selling equity in Hub H2O, and you're just kind of running this experiment to see where it goes.
Yeah, that was definitely the strategy. So we, with both in Terra and Hub, different own, like there was a number of different owners, equity owners for the founding group.
Right.
And we didn't take salaries or anything like that. Yeah, especially not initially. Use the cash flow from AJM, fairly steady, well, relatively steady consulting business.
Yeah.
And basically self-funded our own startups. In my mind, it's kind of how we did that. And one of the things we did well on was non-dilutive government funding. So there's lots of tech funding out there, especially tech funding in the environmental world is pretty, attractive. And we were looking at, as a kind of we were in a sweet spot between like an environmental solution, oil and gas in Alberta, and tech, and kind of putting those three things together. And
there's a lot of options for like grants, et cetera.
Yeah. So Alberta Innovates again was a great partner there, but the biggest one was Terra. So they fund geomatics technologies that have geomatics at their core, and because we're tracking water movements and we were looking at truck locations and where this geomatics was really a big component of the database or the data that's being collected. So ended up raising $500,000 of non-dilutive capital from them. We had to match it, so that's where kind of we put our own capital in the game. Yep. So
and are you, because you had other owners within Hub H2O, and I'm assuming they're not like partners in your consulting business, right? So they're different. So are you, i.e. your consulting business, AJM, putting all of that, like that $500,000 matching? You're the capital provider for that 500?
No, it was basically when we got to that point of needing to match the dollars in Hub, it was myself and Jill, and we were putting kind of pro rata. We were 50-50, but one of our original developers had a small piece still, but we were essentially 50-50 putting it in. Unfortunately, the way things sometimes work out, it didn't. Jill and I ended up going kind of our separate ways. She took the kind of the concept and the technology and focused on looking at moving like hydrocarbons. So we're for trading purposes and kind of more like a midstream type thing. And I took the water piece and continued to build that. So then at that point, I was essentially I was majority owner. I think 90% but no one else was putting in matching funds at that point. That was just me. So
got it. Okay, interesting. Okay, and then at that point when you divert it with your partner Jill there, how did it work with the application? Did you essentially like, this is gonna be a stupid question, but you're like, okay, photocopy, we've got 2 of the base code, go your own way from that date. And like, if you develop it more, great. If you don't, but it's both your prerogative. It's kind of like you get that base code and that's your launch point, or what did that look like?
Yeah. That's essentially what we negotiated and decided made sense was, we would,
Okay. And go after different markets. Okay.
Take it and run it. And we didn't have I don't think we had a specific non-compete or anything like that. It was more just an agreement that
sure,
you focus on that and I'll focus on this. And it's it's one of those things. And starting businesses with other people is there's lots of variables and lots of things happen. But Jill's a fantastic person and still friends with her and everything else. But it just didn't work out at the time, which was
unfortunate. But that's the majority of the way it kind of unrolls, right? It's just you got 2 different brains, you add 3 different brains, and the probability of things not working out increases. Okay, awesome. So you split it out. Now you are essentially the sole owner of it. You're running it. It sounds like now at this point you're running a tech company. You're overseeing that, trying to figure out how to build it as well with your technical people, engineers, programmers, software programmers. You are running your consulting business, AJM. I think you're still also working with clients in that. So not just running the business. So you've got long days. You got a lot going on here.
Yeah. I was most of my focus at that time in that 2017 to 20 range was Hub H2O. I was really Like this is what needs my attention. And we
Okay.
were pretty all in on that. But yes, those other things were still going. AJM was still functioning, and yeah, still making sure the wheels were staying on and we could self-fund this thing.
Totally.
So yeah, maybe the biggest challenge was just like switching my brain from working in a consulting business where it's just, it sounds bad, but it kind of, it's a lot of putting out fires and kind of reactive, like, hey, a client calls, jump on it, like go for it.
Yeah.
You got to do this. Whereas on the startup side, especially on the kind of early days market discovery and meeting with clients and those kind of early business development sales calls, it's very much more proactive and going out there. And it's like, okay, well, I got 2 hours. I'm going to go do some prospecting. And then a consulting client calls and be like, oh my God, wait, that's emergency. And it's like, oh, well, the next 2 hours I'm doing this emergency now. So it was quite tough to balance those two at the same time, just being involved in project related stuff still at AJM. So
would you, like going back, would you do that differently? And the reason I'm asking this, one, I'm just interested, but I think there are other business owners out there right now or in the future that will start looking at, how do I adopt technology into my business? Do I want to build it out myself versus going and just taking an off-the-shelf solution and customizing it?
Yeah.
Would you do it differently, or just kind of what you did was assess where your time needs to be spent for which side of the business and just allocate it there for the time being and then reassess as you go? Or would you do something differently?
Yeah, I think, I don't have any kind of regrets or I wouldn't change how I was spending my time. I think maybe one thing I would have done differently was very early on in Hub H2O, we were speaking with a water management company. So they're the ones actually in the field running the pumps and the hoses, moving water around. And they had set up a few meetings with us and were pretty interested in what we were doing and all this stuff. And I remember Jill and I walking away from one of those meetings and she's like, they're going to want to buy us. Like she like our spidey senses were going, like you could tell they were kind of like
poking. Yeah.
And we were like, oh no, like we wouldn't want to do that. We wouldn't want, like, but in hindsight, I would have gone back to that point, but like that would have been a great partner to bring in. Like the biggest water management company, or I think now they're the biggest in Western Canada, maybe not at the time, but like, just to have their, even if they just took a 20-30% stake, but to have a vested interest to then put out to all their systems.
Like distribution channel, essentially.
Totally, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are we, I trying to take myself back. I think it was maybe we thought the opportunity was so big, like we couldn't give up any equity to some company, or we didn't want to get hitched to one potential customer. It would limit options, and maybe it would have. But at the end of the day, spoiler alert, Hub H2O didn't end up being a success. So
it doesn't exist today. So maybe that would have been a good option. Yeah.
We folded it in 2020. So that's one of those things I maybe would have been more open to those kinds of opportunities, as well as when we were marketing Hub H2O and talking to potential customers, we were getting questions about, could you also send somebody to the field to do X and X? And it's like, oh no, we're just a tech company. We don't do kind of the field stuff. And I kind of kicked myself. It's like, I should have been like, oh, well, Hub H2O doesn't, but our sister company AJM does. We can definitely take care of this for you. Like,
yeah, totally.
But I was so averse to becoming a service company versus a tech company.
Right.
But I think we maybe should have blended that a bit more, because really at the end of the day, a lot of the customers were looking for kind of an all-in-one solution, and you can't, rather than just like popping a new piece of software on them.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well now I got to train. Oh my God. It's like, can you, so I would have been a bit more white glove might be the word, but a bit less focused on
it's sticky. Yeah. And in hindsight, obviously 2020, it's some of the lessons I've learned is having that SaaS product software coupled with services or real people.
Yeah.
And even if you think about some of the reasons why you don't want to put those together is your valuation. If you're thinking about that tech world, my valuation is going to get hit. Well, I've recently seen business valuations where you can have like 40% of your revenue coming from, we'll call them like people services, not software. And they're still getting crazy multiples on what they want. So back then, I think back in 2016, it was maybe a little bit different, but man, extremely sticky. And also I think it just makes it easier for the customer to say, I have this tech tool, but I'm not just left to use it myself. I now have people that are attached to that tool that are wanting to see success in it. Now they're out on my sites as well. So
it would have helped. Yeah, help de-risk it, help get and also one of the challenges on selling tech to, especially the energy industry, but probably any incumbent kind of industry is, they want to know who else is using it. Yes. So getting that first customer is so important. And, if that's what it would have taken for us to get our first 5-10 customers, and then maybe we peel that back, that maybe would have been.
Right. Yeah.
But
roll out the red carpet for the first one. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I guess I do have to say, it's like, why was I starting all these tech companies? Well, these 2 tech companies, but, really at the end of the day, and I still believe this, but, it was clear to me early on, and we did our MBAs together. So I have a passion about business and learning about business and business models and all that kind of stuff. But consulting services, there's 3 things that really hamper them quite a bit. Is there's only so many hours in a day.
You're selling hours. Yep.
You can only charge so much per hour, because there's especially into a fairly established market like environmental consulting. So you're kind of capped on that respect. But then your exit multiples are pretty shitty too. You can a fantastically well-run business with great cash flow, but you're never going to see a multiple like you would see for a SaaS company or some kind of product that's really scalable. So really trying to focus on something scalable, standalone, and could make a bigger dent in the world. That was kind of probably the biggest thing, was just knowing that, okay, well, I've got this consulting thing going, but long term,
like
the ratings aren't all how that works out. Like, let's try and do something different here, and throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what might.
Yeah. And I think that it's a common comment that I think we hear out there. I think I can loop them or bring them all together. It's like the business consulting, the niche consulting, engineering firms, architecture firms, maybe even lawyer, legal accounting firms. It's the same thing. It's essentially at the end of the day, when you go to exit, you're going to sell a multiple of your book, right? And that could be, I think, anywhere from like 1 times to 2 times book value, which is on the low side, like probably the lowest side of multiples. But at the same point, I don't think you can, especially this is my day gig looking for small businesses to acquire. You can't just put all the emphasis on the exit game, because if you have a great consulting business and you run it for 20 years, 35 years, I think my prerogative, and let me know if you've got a different view on this, is the end game when you sell, that's gravy. Leave it as gravy. It's those years that you're running the business for the 20, 30 years. That's profitable. And totally. It's like, what do you do with that cash flow between then and now? Like, maybe you have a third go at a tech company and you get that going. Maybe you do investments into real estate or another business, right? So I don't know. Everything has pros and cons to it. Nothing's perfect. And people that are looking for that perfect, I want a perfect cash flowing, cash cow, no risk, and I want a huge exit.
That's right.
I don't know what those are.
I only want to work 10 hours a week, by the way, too. Yeah, that's the other one. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, good luck finding that.
Man.
No, totally. And I think that's the vision with AJM is let's build a really great company. Like, let's build something that our goal is to be the most sought after environmental company in Western Canada. So, and I see that from 2 perspectives. It's from clients really want to work for us. We have a great reputation for doing good work, for providing excellent value, but also employees want to work for us. We're a great employer. We treat people well. They can have a fulfilling long-term career, and that it's a long-term vision for that, because to me that's where the value is. It's not in, hey, let's like pump this thing up in the next 3 years and see if we can who might buy it or something. Right. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It's not short-term view. Yeah.
The better solution in my perspective is, I'll build it to where I think my skill sets can take it, and I'll cap out at some point, bring, a more experienced or better management team in place.
Right.
To then carry it to the next level. And I'll just, I can sit back as a shareholder or on the board and watch this thing grow and
give that oversight or like strategic view plan. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's going to be probably in my mind, a far better kind of overall exit plan than any kind of acquisition or sale or anything.
So the long-term hold and operate, which not everyone's looking at these days, for sure. Totally. And I think it's a great model. I love it.
Yeah.
So I guess Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to jump in, but it's like
No.
everything's also always for sale. Like someone backs up a dump truck full of money. That's like, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe they're offering me that amount of money for this thing.
Sure.
Like, of course, like, yeah, sure. There would be maybe something that would change that, but given known multiples in the industry and how things go and everything else, they're like, no, I see this. Let's build it to be a long-term awesome business. And then if something like that happens, then we're
you evaluate it
better for it. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that stream of thought. And I think the people that think that way, they're doing different things once they have that crazy opportunity where it's that dump truck shows up, right? They're not on to the next one to say, typically, they're not on to the next one to go, oh, well, I did that over 6 years. Let me go like rinse and repeat and go try to find another dump truck. Usually they still have this long-term vision where they're saying, I expect to, back when they started their first business, I expect to do this for the next 30 years, 35 years, whatever, depending on when you started. If you get an opportunity to exit and, that dump truck of money comes and there's value you give to yourself, your employees, et cetera, typically they're taking those dollars and they're doing something else. Maybe after their 2-year, 5-year non-compete, they stay in the same industry or they go to do something else. There's still that vision of the long term, not just these short, not that there's anything wrong with that, but these short, like 6 to 7 flips.
Yeah, totally.
Right on. So I guess now we're talking about your business today. So I think you are about 30 employees. There's no technology. It's just consulting now. Like if you want, give me a download of what, maybe I've said 30 employees wrong. What does today look like for your business?
Sure. So on the consulting side, we're fairly driven by the seasons, wildlife surveys and those kinds of things happen when there's wildlife around in the summertime. So our field season, last year, we peaked at 30 full-time employees. Some of those were on contract. So once the field season wrapped up, they were moving on. So I think we're in the low 20s right now, but we'll be ramping up again here in the next couple months as we're coming into spring. We also, so one of the things with Hub H2O it died in COVID.
I guess we didn't cover that. Okay. Yeah.
No one was fracking any wells when oil went negative or anything like that. And
sure.
All the development kind of paused and companies were able to get ahead of their water stuff. And maybe now that's coming back to being a major issue because of all the drought conditions and everything else. But I kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to push it or sell it because no one's looking to buy anything right now. They're just looking to survive. And then by 20, I was kind of tapped. I was like, you know what? I don't think I got the stamina to give this another go and run it. And the tech was starting to get a bit stale too. It had been initially developed in 2017, 2018, and it's 2022. So I was like, okay, we got to invest like probably a good chunk of change just to get everything up to date and make sure it's, latest and greatest. And
I think there were a few competitors coming in, were there not?
A few, but we're still fairly,
unique. Okay.
Still fairly unique. Like, no major, nothing too big, but it was for a variety of different reasons. I was just like, look, I think we gave this a solid run and it's probably time to let it go. But what we did then was actually took the software development team from Hub H2O and rolled them into AJM. So one of the benefits of that was we then had some salary expenses that we could expense off of the income of AJM and, have some write-offs while still basically self-funding our own kind of tech stuff. So there is still a software component to what we do. It's a smaller piece than the consulting side, but we are looking to grow it, and we've been able to do some really neat projects. And the model has shifted a bit as well on the software technology side. Is really we're looking for companies to partner with. So let's say Cenovus as another example. Hey, we have this challenge in the environment and regulatory world that we think could be solved with software. Would you guys build it for us? We'll look at it like, okay, that seems pretty interesting. We'll build it for you. We'll actually build it at a reduced rate. Okay. In exchange for us being able to own the IP. The benefit being, well, to Sonovus, it's a lower upfront cost. They still get the same end product and everything else. But then to us, if we own the IP, we can then go market it to other companies who might be experiencing the same problem and use this as now it becomes an asset of ours that we can grow. And I think there's also benefits to a company like a Cenovus from doing that, because then we're constantly improving it and tweaking it and updating it. Whereas sometimes on a consulting kind of or a kind of custom build software tool. You pay for it, and then it just sits stale.
Sits on shelf. Yeah.
And then for 4 years later, it's like, wow, this thing hasn't been updated, and it's unusable now, or right. So
every company has one. Every energy company that I've come across has at least one of those products.
Oh yeah.
And once it gets to 20, 30 years old, they're going, man, no one really knows how to support this. It's like, man, this is huge risk. Like what part of your business is this run? So this is biologic software?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a sister company to AJM, or sorry, sub brand of AJM, technically all under the AJM Environmental umbrella is biologic software. We separated it out under its own brand just to be a bit more clear about this is the tech side of things, and AJM is the consulting services side. Yeah.
Makes sense. Right. So, Okay. So what I heard was biologic software, different brand within the consulting business, and you're looking for innovative customers, maybe your existing customers, maybe new ones that say, we believe there's an opportunity that we're interested in to leverage software to solve this industry problem that we have. So you have this industry innovator and someone that sees the pain, and then you're going to assess that and look at it and say, well, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you look at it and go, okay, we can see the value of that solution. We can see that it is likely valuable to other companies, other players in the industry. So we'll now like co-invest, right? Reduce rate development.
Yeah.
Or do you also, and I guess, and do you also look at it as, if you look at that opportunity, go, actually, this is a great solution for company X who's come to chat with you, but we don't see the ability to scale it to other businesses. Would you consider still doing it, but at like typical full price rates, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have no illusion that every project that is going to come across our plate is going to be something that can be grown into a wider market, or that every company is interested in. So yeah, we do custom build some tools, but we don't do that kind of reduced rate IP exchange
on that.
Ones, and
no point in co-investing.
The kind of clients, customers expect that because they kind of they need one thing for their one
widget for them. Yeah. And then within that, if it is a software solution just for them, do you also provide the I guess ongoing services of maintenance, upkeep, et cetera, like back end support for that, or to be determined?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah,
okay.
But it totally depends on the solution, what's required. So
great.
So some of the clients have, they have their own teams that can manage it. They just don't have the horsepower to build it.
Right.
So they need us to come in and build it, and once it's built, they can bolt it on, and they're good, and really nothing else needed from us. But
good to go, and then it's done.
Yeah.
It's just a project-based scope at that point. No SaaS fees, et cetera. Right. And then when it is a project that you will co-invest, so you charge reduced rates.
Yeah,
that is a value to them as well, because it is a risk to you as well. When I think about software development, right? It's let me know if you agree or if you think about this differently. But when I think about software development, when you identify an industry problem, excuse me, you are building out this software to meet those problems, and all of a sudden a customer, like a primary customer, comes and says, we love this, we want to buy from you, and we want you to tailor it in these ways. There's a risk to that, because you might be tailoring your product that is not scalable, right? And in your situation, that could happen, right? So that's a risk to you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense as like kind of a win-win, where they're paying some, you're paying some, you get the IP. I would expect most of your customers, they're not software businesses.
No,
it's not their core competency, so they shouldn't want to.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest shift that I've seen in the past 10 plus years of kind of doing this stuff is, the large energy companies as a good example, they used to be very protective of their IT, and it's like, no, it has to be on our internal servers, and you're like, oh my God, like the cloud's not good.
That was only back in 2018. I remember selling software in 18.
Oh God.
And I wow. And even like very large, as US companies, but very large US companies, you would talk to one side of the business and they would say, oh no, we need everything on-prem in server stacks. And it's like, what? And then you talk to another side of the business and they're like, oh no, we don't do on-prem at all. It's like, okay, this must be the transition period.
Things are changing. Yeah, no, it's been definitely an evolution, and yeah, these companies have realized that getting custom built software for each little solution that they want at the end, 10, 20 years later, you're just looking at dozens of different solutions that are just like, well, like, we're not a tech company. Let's get something off the shelf, or let's use some, maybe even open source stuff, and let's do what we do well, which is whether it's oil and gas, or it's mining, or it's construction, or whatever. Let's do what we do well. And, really at the end of the day, these little applications that make our lives easier and provide us value, they're not changing our world. Like, they're not driving our bottom line.
Yeah. They're bits of, like, add them together. They're valuable to the business. It's about, like, you need to focus on what's your major value proposition. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think over time too, we're going to see this. We went through a phase, I believe, in industry where companies started looking at, we have 120 different applications and there's overlap in them. We can't do this anymore. We don't want this to happen. So we want one-stop solution. I think that's crazy. Like, there's no way you're finding one-stop solution, and you don't want one-stop solution. Like, do you want to know what that looks like for being held to crazy pricing because there's no other, like, you do not want that. But I think it's just the evolution of software solutions for industrial, like any industry, right? You're going to have to go through a cycle. You're going to go through and realize there's products that you don't need anymore, or there's overlap, and you kind of have to do a consolidation to look at what's out there now, what's been developed over the last 5 years. How do I consolidate these things and stay on top of it and kind of manage your risk? But
totally.
Anyway, bigger discussion for another time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I guess we've got a couple minutes left here. AJM today, and you've got sorry, I lost the name again. Jeez. BioLogic? Yeah. BioLogic on the software side. So give me a little bit of a download to what you see in the future. You talked a little bit about at some point bringing in a management team. I know you're currently still working. You've got some key customers that you work with. So you've got that hat on. You're doing some coaching and mentoring for your staff. You're managing, obviously, the business day-to-day with some managers too. You've got this tech side of the business. What do the next maybe 5 years look like for your business at a whole? Like, what are you trying to get to? Is it growth? Is it geographical growth? And I think, and I could be wrong because I'm not in your segment at all, but I think it's a great place to be, just with the amount of focus and growing focus, which I don't think is going to go away, on impact that businesses have, not just profit, how they create profit, but like impact, social impact, environmental impact. This is a great place to be. And I know Alberta's, even though we get a bad rap, Alberta's doing a lot around making sure we're producing ethical, good, clean energy for the world. And there's lots of improvement to go, for sure, right? It's not perfect, but I think it's a great space. So I know it's a long-winded question, but bring it back. What does the future look like over the next maybe 5 years for your business? And how do you think about the energy industry within Western Alberta, or sorry, Western Canada?
So we're definitely in growth mode. We want to be 4x 2023 by 2029. So, pretty lofty plans on the growth side of things. But we want that growth to be healthy, organic, fairly deliberate, shall I say? And, we don't want to just, think we can be everything to everyone. We know what we're good at. We want to focus on those things. We see the growth coming from, serving our existing clients, even better, and other business units and those kinds of things, but also diversifying. So geographically, we're mostly Alberta, BC right now. We've done a bit of work in Saskatchewan and a bit in the territories, but we see those opportunities geographically, and then we also see we want to be diversifying across to different industries as well, which helps. One of the biggest challenges on the consulting services side, especially when you're project based, like lots of our work is, it can be very cyclical. Right. So the diversification helps with that. So it's a growth mode, and I couldn't agree more. I think the environment and regulatory side of things is it's not getting any easier for companies, that's for sure. It changes maybe with political change and those kinds of things, but the general trend is it's rising as a pain point. So we want to help our clients deal with that. Like we firmly believe that development needs to happen, responsible development needs to happen, and we want to be there to help enable it. So we want to reduce those impacts as much as possible, however we can, whether it's providing that guidance or mitigation plans or what have you. But it's also helping our clients through the regulatory hoops to ensure that those projects can get built. Because really, at the end of the day, we're so fortunate as Canadians, as Albertans, to live just an unreal standard of living that is just like it's the envy of the world, or 90% of the world, right? And I guess tying this full circle, growing up in Saudi Arabia, we got to travel to a lot of different places and a lot of developing countries. And when we moved back to Canada, I was like, we have it so good. We are so fortunate as Canadians, and it's because we've had development and we've had these economic opportunities, but it's been done well. And when you're developed and have economic opportunities, I think countries and societies that are able to do a better job protecting the environment and take care of the air and the water and the land and the wildlife and all those kinds of things. So it all needs to happen together. It's, I kind of joke early in my career is, there's two kind of paths in the environmental world that you could go. You can go like chain yourself to bulldozers, or you can go like work with the companies who are building the projects and help them minimize their impacts and like get your hands dirty and try and solve some problems. And maybe it doesn't feel as good. You maybe won't have the moral high ground that some tree hugger chained to a bulldozer might, but I think you're having more impact.
You're moving the needle. You're making an impact and change. Yeah, you're actually doing something. And it's pretty easy to just say no to everything as any protester or anyone who's against anything. That's pretty easy to say no, but it's pretty hard to come up with alternatives and okay, well, this needs to happen. How can we do this in the best way? And that's where you really got to think about things. Anytime I'm talking about oil and gas industry, energy industry, those cycles, 7 to 10 years, any thoughts about where we are right now in that cycle? It's a, coming out of COVID, it's a little bit tough. We got prices of oil going up. Are we close to a tough period coming? How are you thinking about that, if at all?
I don't know.
No one has the right answer. So
$1 million question. No, I think, at the end of the day, if I were to kind of summarize specific to just like Alberta and oil and gas and, what we're tied to here, and oil and gas isn't going away in the near term for sure. So, we better understand what's happening and try to minimize those impacts again, going back to it. But what's happening specific to oil and gas, I think the cycles are just going to be bigger with the lack of investment for a number of years. I think that's going to come and bite us a bit, and we're going to see lots of volatility, which is tough on the service side. Kind of
bigger swings.
Yanked in a few directions when we're trying to staff and make sure our capacity is appropriate and everything else. So, but I got a few other thoughts that maybe around what's happening with the whole LPG. Anyway,
LNG. We can take it offline too. I'll get your thoughts later.
That was a bit of a rabbit hole. So.
Totally. A lot of different opinions come out too on those type of outlooks. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. So let's end off with one more question here. And I always give people guests a choice of a couple questions just so they don't get a crappy question. They're like, I hate that. So we'll have some fun. This one seems to be a favorite. And I like it too, because it actually gives you an ability to leave things with something to have people think about. From everything that you've experienced and learned through your career, most specifically over the last 12 years in running your business, what is the one thing you want to leave with people to think about? What would you put on a billboard driving into, call it downtown Calgary or downtown Houston for oil and gas cities? What would you put on that billboard to advise, tell, or provide an insight to small, medium business owners to see on a daily basis? Yeah,
there'd be two statements. One, and I remember I found it. I don't know if you remember those like inspirational posters back in like the late 90s or whatever. It'd be like a putting green and like some quote on the bottom.
Sure,
about,
I do.
Just something like super cliche, but I found one of those and it was in high school, and it's just like it hit me, and I had it up my wall and think about it quite a bit. But fate loves the fearless. Just remembering that, take a risk. What's the worst that's going to happen? Fate is going to love the fearless, and looking back on on my failures, it's that's probably the thing I'm most proud of is at least I wasn't scared of trying. With Terra and Hub H2O and a variety, many other failures. So I think that would be the headline, and then the sub headline or second line would just like be a good person. It's maybe it doesn't need to be said, but sometimes I feel it kind of does need to be said sometimes, especially in the small business world. There's lots of opportunities to maybe take a shortcut or not be totally
close to that unethical line. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, or an employee quits and you feel like you want to hold a grudge or something or do something, but it's like, be a good person. It comes around, and I think that looking back on kind of some of the successes that I've had, I think a lot of that has just come from focusing on being a good person, treating people well,
sure,
true to my word, and that whole piece of it.
I like it, and maybe we can put this picture. Do you see that? Put that on the billboard. So like up in the top corner with the cop, we'll put the headline, and then be a good person, because the next time the rattlesnake might bite you.
Yeah, that's right.
I had to throw it up there. Throwback.
Look at that mop. Yeah, look at that salad. Needed a haircut that summer, but I was a poor student, so that was not a priority.
And I think a lot of people will value some of the topics that we went through today. So thank you very much for making the time. I'll put some contact information and other notes in the show notes.
Thanks, John.
Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the day and building the business.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, Adam.
Take care. See ya.
Bye-bye.